my sleeve has District of Columbia Fire and EMS. I think the reference that they're making in terms of cost is more personal costs in purchasing T-shirts. And I must say that I've purchased some T-shirts that say DCFD in the course of my career.
So that's also an issue then, is the cost to the individual. Not so much a cost to the agency, but to the individual.
I think it's more personal cost, yes.
And that would be a reason for phasing it in.
Yes.
And you agree with that?
I do.
Now this leads then to another question. The NFPA compliant clothing. NFPA is National Fire
Protection Agency.
Protection Agency.
Association.
I assume that the outerwear is NFPA compliant.
It is.
That's the gear that we see if a firefighter is going into a fire, what looks to be heavy gear that they're wearing.
Yes.
But they have underneath that clothes. I'm going to call them street clothes, correct?
Yes, they do. The concern from the firefighters is that non-NFPA compliant clothing has polyester in it. Polyester has a lower ignition temperature, and if the outer gear fails, then that clothing with polyester in it will melt into the individual's skin. So they'd rather have all cotton clothing.
Do you disagree with that?
I don't disagree with it, but I know there's a substantial cost involved. But the safety of the members is our primary concern.
And whose cost is it? Is it the agency's?
It's the agency's cost.
Well, but these T-shirts that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, those are the individual's cost.
The T-shirts are individual cost, and they're not required to wear any logo at all. What we were trying to do is make sure that any logo that is displayed before the public actually addresses the concerns and needs and represents all of our members. The NFPA compliant gear would be the outer shirt and the pants that they wear. That's the cost to the agency.
The shirt and the pants. So this would be, I'm thinking of street clothes.
Yes.
Or station wear, is it called station wear?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about basically the shirt and the pants.
Yes.
And who pays for that?
We do.
The department pays
yes.
for that. All right. In 2008, I believe we adopted an FY 2009 budget that had $2.5 million in it for, quote, the purchase of NFPA compliant uniforms, as well as replenishing personal protective gear. Unquote. I'm assuming that compliant uniforms would mean that station wear.
Yes.
So we should have bought it already.
Good morning, sir. I'm sorry, could you repeat that question, Mr. Mendelson?
I believe in 2008, this council adopted the FY 2009 budget. And actually, I'm looking at my notes here, which say in our FY 10 budget, the council left in place $2.5 million for, quote, the purchase of NFPA compliant uniforms, as well as replenishing personal protective gear, unquote. That would have included station wear. What happened to it? We should have bought it already. Or did this get sucked up by the department for other purposes?
Mr. Mendelson, the purchase of the compliant station wear was left towards the prior administration. I know there was funding allocated for the compliant station wear. I know over the past few fiscal years we've have reduced some of the funding in order to supplement shortages in other areas. As for the total amount that you've quoted, I would have to get back in touch with you because I don't readily know that answer to that.
Okay, I would like a itemized response. And can I get this by, let's say, next Wednesday? Of what happened to the $2.5 million, how the $2.5 million that we budgeted for the, quote, the purchase of NFPA compliant uniforms as well as replenishing personal protective gear, unquote, was spent. How much was spent? My question is, how was it spent? Itemized. And just so that you understand, how much was spent for station wear, how much was spent for protective gear, how much was reprogrammed to cover overtime. However, I want an itemization of how it was spent.
And sir, what fiscal year was that?
My notes say that it was the FY10 budget. And for that matter, if there were expenditures for station wear in FY9 or 11, that's a slightly different question. If there were expenditures in FY9 or 11 for station wear, I'd like to know. Because my guess is that since this seems to be an issue today, the money was not spent despite the council budgeting it at the mayor's request. We're supposedly on 10-minute rounds, so I will turn to my colleague, Mr. Evans.
Looks like 12 minutes and 20 seconds.
I'm the chair, Mr.
Chief, I'd like to explore two areas during my questioning here. One, going back to the logo issue. Again, the vast majority of members of the Fire and EMS Department want to keep the ability to put DCFD on the back of their T-shirts. It's what I've talked to them, talked to the union, talked to everybody. So this issue, up prior to your becoming chief, anyone could put whatever they wanted to on the back of their shirt. If someone wanted to put DCFD, they could do that. If they wanted to put FEMS on the back of their shirt, they could do that. And now, as I understand it, you've given a directive that they cannot any longer put DCFD. So I just want to get is that factually correct?
That was the initial directive, yes.
Okay, so has that changed?
Well, right now, that has changed. It's held in abeyance for 120 days while we talk with the unions and actually talk to the members to find out what is going to be the most acceptable logo or display to represent our membership.
Okay, so during this discussion period, the end result could be that they would still be allowed to put whatever they want, DCFD or FEMS on the back of their shirt. During the
120-day period, yes.
Okay, and so I would like to follow carefully what happens here, because I know that there is, I can use the word pressure or something from the from the EMS community, not necessarily even people who work for the department, who want to bring about this change. But there is no legal reason to do it. I've read the report on page 28 that does include a suggestion of this type, but there is no legal reason to do it other than a directive from yourself, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, let's see what happens here. I have stated many times that across the country, any department of this nature has a symbol that says FD, and obviously the most world-renowned one is the Fire Department of New York, FDNY.
The most world-renowned one is DC.
Now DCFD is, I think so.
See that it's New York. But I would ask you before any legislation is introduced is to let us try to work it out.
Okay. I have actually already introduced the legislation, and it's in Mr. Mendelson's hands, because he's chairman of the committee. I suspect it won't go anywhere, but the legislation has been introduced, and but let's try and work this out, because I know it is. I get stopped constantly about this issue, and I have had very few people say, we don't want to. Most people tell me they want to keep DCFD, so that's where we come down on it. Okay, so that's number one, and number two is on your budget. I'll preface by saying this. My colleague David Catania at the hearing on when the budget was introduced was very apt in pointing out that we have had significant increases in this budget alone in different agencies and departments. I have done a study over the last 8 years showing that parts of our government, human services, has had an 81% increase in their spending. Public schools, 55% increase in their spending. Your department, very little. Okay? So my question for you, and I know you always find yourself you and your predecessors always find yourself in a tough political position. You work for the administration, and you answer to the committee. And it's hard for any chief to come before us and say, I don't have enough money, because you kind of have to toe the line. My question is very simple. Do you have enough money to run your department this year, given the fact that there are many agencies in this government who are getting increases, and many agencies in this government who have gotten enormous increases in the last 8 years, to which your department is not one of them?
The budget that's been allocated to us from the mayor is enough.
Is enough, okay. I know you can always use more money. Anyone can always use more money.
Yes.
But you believe you can adequately run the fire department and EMS system in the upcoming year with the amount of funds that you have. And that also, indicates, as Councilmember Mendelson has done a great job at, not spending overtime, not coming back to us and saying, yes, I had enough money, but I ran up a $10 million overtime spending pressure that allowed me to run the department as it should have been run. So you're okay with what you got, and we're not going to have this spending pressure from the department down the road.
We're going to do everything we can to avoid any of those foreseeable spending pressures, and one of the ways we avoid that is by good management.
Okay. And one final thing that I'd like through the committee, if you could submit, if you had your druthers and did have extra funding, what would you use that extra funding for? To give you an example, with the police department will be coming up later, increased officers. You heard me talk a little bit about that. How do I get up to the 4,000 officers? It's going to cost $10, $15 million to get there. In the ideal world, that's what I want to try and do. If the fire and EMS department had more money, how would you, what is it that you could do better with additional funds? And I think that's very important to me, because when I see the list, I'll be able to make a determination as to maybe you do need some of the things that are not currently being funded, and would like to have an opportunity to view that. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Again, Chief, thank you very much, and all of your
you.
staff and officers for all that you do.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Evans, can I kind of follow up on that last thing? I mean, it would seem to me the priorities, if the agency had all the money it needed, would be to fully fund a robust cadet program to get more DC residents into the department, correct?
Yes.
And to make sure that all of your equipment is as modern as possible, meaning that if you've got some 10-year-old engines, you would replace them with new engines and so forth. That's the equipment or apparatus. Mm-hmm. And then get the firehouses up to date.
And get a contract for our union.
And a contract for the union. Now, you asked him to submit, but I would think those are probably the top four.
That would be any executive manager's dream in the fire service.
Look, if you could submit, and as I asked, and quantify those and any others you might have to the committee and to myself, that would be very much appreciated.
And I'm hoping we can get the information we're asking, because I asked some questions earlier, that we get that by next Wednesday.
Yes, sir, I heard you.
That's kind of pushing things along, but we got a lot to do.